Hey guys, before I start this video, I just wanted to give you another one of my Future Me PSAs. In this video, I will be discussing some major forms of bigotry which I condemn, including transphobia, homophobia, and racism. And the second thing is that this is supposed to be a two-way discussion. That's why I upload these videos, to get my thoughts out, but also to hear the thoughts of other people. So if you have something you'd like to say in response, just leave me a comment. So with that in mind, let's get to the video.
Hello and welcome back to whatever edition this is. This is Pac-Man Thoughts, and today I thought I would talk about the goddamn left-right discussions that are happening in this country nowadays. I just watched this YouTuber called, I think his name is Matt Walsh. I just found his videos today, and I don't remember specifically what I was looking up. Oh yeah, I remember what it was. There's a YouTuber named Matt Baum who discusses LGBT representation, and I was looking up to see what videos Matt Baum had about trans representation. And this YouTuber named Matt Walsh came up because he was having this discussion on his channel. He's like one of these YouTube radio host types, like kind of like, not really a podcast like you would see with like Joe Rogan or something, more like a Ben Shapiro type thing, or Steven Crowder. And I didn't want to just pick people on the right when I was describing what he does, but he's basically that kind of format. And he was showing this video of this trans woman who walked into an establishment where a guy had a trans exclusionary sign outside of his business. That was really sweet what I just did there with that. Basically, the sign was I'm not going to quote specifically what it said, but well, actually I will. I'll let you fill in the blank. If it said if you have a, you're not a chick. Okay, you know what it said, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm thinking, I'm clicking this video, I'm going to watch this, and he's going to talk about just this issue, because it said something. It said watch trans person and store owner have a debate about transgenderism. Okay, so two things in that title tipped me off to the fact that this was probably somebody on the right. The first one is that it said transgender person. So, like, that very much strikes me as the person trying not to take either side in the title. Either side being acknowledging that trans people are the gender that they identify as, or like, being against that. So he was just saying transgender person, and then he said transgenderism, which is usually a term used exclusively by people on the right. Okay. And I watched this video, and he said basically, like, this is just a fact. Trans people aren't real, basically, and this is just a fact. Okay. So I was kind of intrigued seeing him say something that was just so blatantly stupid on his channel, because, the thing is about, just real quick with the right and, like, trans issues, is they tend to say that this is just a matter of science. We believe in science. But it's like, in my experience, almost all the scientists that I've seen disagree with them. And I promise I'm getting to my main point. I will get to my main point in just a second. I'm just explaining, like, the background of how I got to this place of wanting to discuss this. Almost all the scientists, whether it be, biology, psychology, people who are qualified to talk about this issue, they're not anti-trans. And yet these people keep claiming, oh, the science is this. And it's like, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. And then, so I was intrigued by seeing someone on YouTube say something so stupid. So what I did was, I was like, okay, I'll look at some of his other stuff. Because, one of the things about YouTubers and people who are of different political opinions, whether they hold them genuinely or not, is... well, if they do hold them genuinely, then I am interested in hearing what they have to say, even if I disagree with it a lot. So I was looking up some of his other videos, and he was talking about the Sesame Street thing with one of the characters they introduced who was an Asian Muppet. And then I watched another video he had about a lady who made an article about women who regret having children. And I noticed something in all of these videos. Some of the things that he said, like for example, he made a point about, you know, making children hyper aware of race and how that might not always have good consequences, rather than giving them characters that are kind of, you know, balance. I mean, okay, so for me watching this, it was about balancing, you know, making characters who are raceless with characters, you know, because that's what the Muppets do a lot of the time, with making children hyper aware of race. You know, that's the interesting thing to me. So, like, not everything he said in that video, I think, was wrong, was 100% wrong. But this just leads to a broader point, and the main point I want to talk about. People don't like to talk to me about things sometimes because I tend to irritate people by not wanting to be in a tidal wave of opinion, like taking a particular side about something, and I need to point out here that I am not trying to do the idiotic false balance thing that I've seen people do who don't understand politics. That is the thing that I've seen so many people do, and it drives me crazy. These are the people who just sit back and go, oh yeah, that's interesting. I guess no one can know who's correct. I find that just extremely annoying, okay? Because I think people who say that politics don't matter, or doesn't matter, I don't know how do you conjugate that? I don't know. People who say that politics is not important blatantly do not understand politics, sometimes by choice, right? Sometimes don't understand those kinds of things at all, because they don't want to understand those kinds of things. People who detach themselves from politics don't understand the impact that politics has on their everyday life, and they try to maintain this false balance. Okay, that drives me crazy. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is when I'm approaching an issue, I usually try to see, like, okay, why am I having a knee-jerk reaction to what this person said? Why am I having a knee-jerk reaction to what this person said? And is this person partially right? Well, usually what I try to ask is, does this person mean what they're saying? Because if a person's like let's say they're a politician who is just, they're trumpeting a certain point because of the money going in on a particular side from a particular entity, then I don't give a shit about what that person's saying, because we're not, you know, you're not a human being having a genuine conversation with me at that point. You're a person who is just repeating something that you're supposed to repeat, you know, with the carrot or stick approach, basically. Someone waved some money in your face and said, hey, if you say this, we'll give you this money. If not, we're gonna, you know, be mean to you in the press. You know, so I don't care about that. But if someone is genuinely saying something that they believe, I will almost always listen to them, because I don't want to be in a situation where I'm in an echo chamber. This particularly has meaning to me because I was in an echo chamber for a lot of my life. I was. I hung around a lot of people from the top down who disagreed, who agreed with me about a lot of things. And that started to get to me, and I got out of it. I don't want to have like revisionist history here, because I should break it down a little bit. So I was in circles, I should say, with a lot of people who were very much in agreement with me about things. And sometimes that was to my detriment, but a lot of the time too, I was in public school. Even as a very religious person, I was in public school. I was around people who a lot of people in my church were telling me not to hang around, not because of any nefarious activities they were involved in, but just because they had, you know, all these vastly different ideas about things sometimes. So anyway, I don't want to sit here and say, well, I was in an echo chamber and I never got out of it. It's like, no, I think the times that I was not in an echo chamber, those times actually kind of helped me leave the echo chamber. So maybe that's more so why I'm more passionate about this. But, I was religious, and I believe incorrect for a long time about a lot of things, because I didn't allow myself, even though I was around some other people, there's a certain degree of information intake I would not allow myself to have. Even if in my mind I knew it wasn't really that correct. So it's harmful to be around people who are just going to say yes, this, or that all the time. And I also don't think that, I've said also a lot, I don't think that the political sides of the spectrum, insofar as that even has any meaning, I don't think that they're equal either. I'm not going to say, people, it's the problem is extremism. There's people on the right who are extremists and people who are left on the extremists, and they're always the same all the time. And we can never say one is worse than the other. I think when it comes to, action on the world and actual impact on society and stuff, I think the far right is far worse than the left. But when it comes to just rhetoric and the degree to which you will be just attacked if you don't agree with the masses, I think that the far left is much worse when it comes to that. But I'm reluctant to even say that, because then we get all this shit about, oh my god, the left are always trying to cancel everyone. Everyone's so canceled. T.J. Kirk has a really, really good video actually about this. I don't remember what it's called, but he talks about, Dr. Seuss being canceled and all these other things that were supposedly canceled. And, a lot of them were just private entities. It was like Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben, like all these private companies deciding that, hey, this might be kind of racist, let's amend that. And then all these people on the right who were talking about things being canceled. We had, even fucking Ted Cruz signing copies of Green Eggs and Ham, as if that made any sense at all, right? Because that whole thing was Dr. Seuss had some books, including, I know The Cat's Quizzer was one of them, just books from Doctor Who. Did I say Doctor Who? I meant to say Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss books that had some insensitive racial depictions in them, and Dr. Seuss Company decided, we're not going to print those anymore. And Ted Cruz said the left was canceling everything, I think, and then he decided to sign a copy of Green Eggs and Ham because he doesn't agree with Dr. Seuss being canceled. Even though Dr. Seuss didn't get canceled, even though they still sell Green Eggs and Ham, none of it made any sense. But that's the problem when you have these sort of ideologues. That guy I watched, Matt Walsh, his videos are never like, hey, the left said this thing, someone on the left said this thing, and I can see what they're saying. They're right about this thing, but here's all the ways they're wrong. He doesn't even say, well, they're just 85% wrong. And 15% right. Here's a few things they got right about this. It's never that, is it? It's no, the left, they're all dumb and inconsistent, and they're so whiny, and they want everything, and they're so entitled. And it's no one is wrong all the time. And I'm going to say that. I think the only way someone can be wrong all the time is if they're actually out there saying something that they don't believe, right? I include, the worst political movements, I include those in this category. The genocidal political movements. There's a lot of manipulation going on. There's genuine hatred coming down from the top, and they're exploiting, the fears that people have and stuff like that. So I don't doubt that there's genuine hatred and bigotry going in there, but they will make claims a lot of times, they'll claim, that God is supporting them, or they'll, all the other things, or, they'll deify themselves. Everything they say will be designed to stomp out dissent, and foster a cult. Those kinds of things. Those kinds of ideologies, I think, some things like that, it's okay, they're always wrong. But I don't know that it's possible for anyone to be wrong about everything by accident. I just don't know that that's correct. And some people, it's like they say with broken clocks. Broken clocks are right twice a day. Some people are only right maybe 3% of the time about their ideology. Like 3% of the time, they're like, okay, this doesn't contradict reality, you know. But the rest of the time, maybe they are. But I mean, it's these people who want to frame anyone on the other side of the spectrum as being wrong all the time. That's what irritates me. Because if you ask me, for example, like politicians who I support, it's almost always Democrats that I'm going to vote for. Because I'm more in line with what they believe. There are some things about right-wing politicians that are so extreme with regard to disagreeing with my own beliefs about how I think the country should be run, that I couldn't look past them and vote for right-wing politicians. But there are definitely conservative politicians who sometimes they say things and I'm like, yeah, I can't really disagree with that. If, and this is a big if they're saying those things because they believe them. I think there's a lot of corruption in Washington, and I think most of it is concentrated on the right. But there's still a lot of it on the left, right? But I have trouble identifying specifically what I would vote for in terms of ideology. Or not vote for, how I'd categorize myself. Like, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Well, I'm definitely not a Republican, and I'm definitely not a Democrat either, because the Democratic Party has a lot of really stupid stuff going on that I just don't agree with. Most of the things I disagree with are just pro-corporate things. I also didn't agree with all the provisions of the Green New Deal, which I realize is not legislation yet. It's just a framework. But there are some things in the Green New Deal that are just way too broad, and I don't think are feasible. And I mean, like for example, guaranteeing everyone a government job. I don't really know. I would, like, that's the thing, like, it's a framework, and I'm like, okay, but that's so broad that I would need to see more specifically what you're talking about before I could even say, like, oh yeah, I agree with that. You know? So, like, when it comes to politics, I have trouble, you know, firmly categorizing myself. And when it comes to just general ideology, I mean, like, when it comes to things like religion, too, I am not atheist. I am technically an atheist, but I think, like, things like agnosticism and Gnosticism and theism and atheism, a lot of those things get so muddled that it comes down to definitions and not, you know, it comes down to concepts and not just words, what you mean. Because whether you're agnostic or atheist, it depends on who you're talking to and what they define it as, right? And people who pretend that these things just have one definition, like it's always this way, it's just, it becomes semantic. Basically, all of this is just to say, to know what I believe on things, you just kind of have to talk to me a lot of the time, but I will tell you. And if it's something that I don't want, if I don't feel comfortable talking to you about it, I will just tell you I don't feel comfortable talking about this. And I will listen to almost anyone if they're genuine. And there's probably going to be something I agree with. There are people I mostly disagree with, like I said. Since I guess we're talking about YouTube people, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, I mentioned them earlier. Joe Rogan, I mentioned him earlier. Kyle Kalinske, TYT Network, Vosh, Genetically Modified Skeptic, Cosmic Skeptic, TJ Kirk. These are a lot of people I've watched, just off and on. And there are things I've agreed with all of them about, you know? And for that reason, you know, a lot of those people are right-wing people. Even Milo Yiannopoulos. I believe there were some things he said that were correct. Now, the tone and the narrative that he tried to deliver with them, I don't agree with. But there are just isolated things, isolated takes he's had on things where I'm like, yeah, I can see that. Him being right about that, specifically with with regard to, like, politics is what I'm talking about, right? But obviously there were some things that Milo Yiannopoulos said that I believe were very reprehensible and I would not agree with, and I think were very harmful. So, like, but those people were still on the right, and I would not say, like, the right wing is always this way. You know? I'd say and I might, have slips of the tongue and say that sometimes when I'm being hyperbolic and I'm talking to someone who knows that I have more nuanced views on the matter, that I don't actually think that, like, oh, the right wing is just like this all the time. But I mean, like, when I'm on a platform like this, I try not to say things like, oh, the right is just always like this. Because I think it's more complicated than that. Almost anything that you can look at that is oversimplified, I shouldn't say oversimplified, because saying oversimplified would make the argument circular. Almost anything that you see that is very simplified, you can just sum everything up like this. It's almost always more complicated than that. And I just wish that a lot of these people who are on YouTube and on talk radio in general, I wish a lot of these people would just, like, not be so transparently unoriginal to try to get people riled up and on their side, because that's what it's about, isn't it? Being an ideologue. It's about money, it's about popularity, it's about saying the most far extremist thing that's going to appeal to the base, and if nothing else, just get people upset, so they'll comment. It's not something, I don't know that they would actually believe like that in real life, and I guess talking about whether someone actually believes something is a whole different topic, because I just realized kind of maybe a contradiction in what I just said. I'm realizing this in real time. So I just said it's almost impossible for someone to be wrong all the time, right? But yet I just said, well, a lot of these hosts, they're always oversimplifying things all the time. Well, isn't that kind of a contradiction? Yeah, I think it is, but why are they doing that, though? Maybe that plays into what I said earlier about them being like, okay, well, I'm going to say this thing that's going to upset people, right? And I'm just going to believe this. I'm going to say it as if I believe it, to get these people riled up. Because this is, it's a performance, I'm going to take out the nuances. I think that happens sometimes, yeah. I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. I'm glad I named that for myself. Huh, isn't that great? Oh, by the way, I want to talk about this too. Kyle Kulinski was one of the YouTubers that I used to watch the most closely when it came to politics, but he kept saying something that just made me stop watching him. I unsubscribed from him, and I haven't watched any of his videos since. He kept wanting the President of the United States, one Mr. Joe Biden, to... It's almost unbelievable. He wanted Joe Biden to base whether he investigated Joe Manchin's family and Kyrsten Sinema's family for their corruption. He wanted to base that on how they voted for the Build Back Better agenda. So if you don't know what I mean by that, Joe Biden situation, and of course this is 2021, so if you're watching this later, this is that's the year I'm talking about. Joe Biden was in a situation where he needed all 50 Democrats in the House to vote for the Build Back Better Act, which would include social services. That's got the child tax credit, it's got universal paid leave, it's got universal pre-K in it. It was supposed to have a lot of other good things in it, but that didn't happen for whatever reason. The reason was corruption, but I don't know the specific details. A lot of people have been making claims about that. Oh, this is definitely what happened, but they are not inside the situation, so it's hard to say. But either way, a lot of that stuff got taken out of the Build Back Better Act, and I still don't know as of this date how that turned out. But it's a question right now whether we're going to be able to get Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Probably, but not definitely, because the president tends to is saying that he thinks that the Build Back Better Act will pass. So my inclination is he's probably right about that, because if he said that and then it didn't, it would be a huge embarrassment to him and his administration, and he needs to win re-election. So I don't imagine him saying that if it wasn't true. But Kyle was sitting here saying, okay, well, if you can't get them to vote for this and be in favor of these other good things that we should also include in the bill, then what you should do is call them into your office and say, hey, if you want another military base in your state, if you want this funding, you vote for this bill. But if you don't vote for this bill, I'm going to be your worst, and I'm quoting him almost exactly here. If you don't vote for this bill, I'm going to be your worst enemy. I'm going to instruct the Department of Justice to look into your family about this corruption. And what's the implication there? That if they don't disagree with Joe Biden, then he will look the other way about the corruption. If they vote the way he wants him to, they will, Joe Biden's going to look the other way when it comes to their corruption. That, to me, is obstruction of justice and bribery and a bunch of other illegal things. And Kyle Kulinski kept saying that. And I will not give someone my YouTube business who's going to continue to just advocate the kinds of things that got Trump impeached in the first place. And if any right-wing politician did that, then they would probably immediately be against it. But that's the thing about Kyle, is that I think he's saying that because he believes it, and he doesn't realize how dumb it is. And make no mistake, it is very dumb. It's one of the dumbest things he's ever said, and I can't believe he kept saying it. And I couldn't believe it so much that I unsubscribed eventually. But yeah, that's something that I think he genuinely believes, right? Now, if Kyle was out there saying that kind of stuff all the time and could never see reason about that, and was also saying, well, Trump also, either he's very much in a cult, or he would be saying it for the clicks. But I don't think he's saying it for the clicks, right? I guess the term I'm thinking of here is grifter. I've refused to say that word so far because, well, not refused. Refuse is not the right word. I haven't said it so far because it's very polarizing, and I think it's overused. I think people are always accusing people of being grifters who are not grifters. But that's essentially what I'm talking about here, is being a grifter. Being an ideologue who's just saying crazy things. But I think in the general population, people also don't think of these issues as complicated as they are. And again, I don't want to do the false balance thing here that a lot of people do, where it's like, oh golly gee, we can never know who's right. We cannot have an opinion. Beep boop. That's not how anything works, okay? Like, for example, people were saying, well, why can't Ellen DeGeneres hang out with George Bush? Is it so wrong to have a friend who's, what, a murderous war criminal? Which is what George Bush is? Like, yeah. Like, no, there are some things where you just need to take a stand, right? I don't sit and break bread with war criminals. Hey, and if Ellen DeGeneres is getting George Bush to change his mind, good for her. If that's what it takes for George Bush to see the error of his ways, good for her. But I think the issue is, people, that's not what, I think people know Ellen well enough to know that's not what was happening. That's not what was happening. They were just hanging around. They were just hanging out, right? So, who knows, man? Maybe I'm wrong about the Ellen thing. Maybe she is doing that. I don't know. I mean, Ellen DeGeneres, again, here we go with the complicated stuff. She's been horrible to her own staff. Does that mean she's incapable of being a decent person about other things? No. And I think a lot of this, not on the side of ideologues, but just people in general, I think a lot of this is cognitive dissonance. I think this happens a lot with people who, like, bad things come out about them later. Because you don't want to believe that someone that you idealized, or that you looked up to, or whatever, you don't want to believe that such a person I did not realize I was playing. I thought that was a demo. You don't want to, come to terms with the fact that someone that you really admired is actually a horrible person. So a lot of times people will say, well, they were never really that good to begin with. Which, is kind of an intellectually disingenuous thing to cling to. I get it. But maybe this is the same thing with people on these kinds of assumptions about people on the other side of the spectrum of their political beliefs. Maybe it's easier for them to rationalize their own belief system if they believe that those who hold opposing views can't possibly have a consistent worldview, can't possibly be right about anything. They're just constantly confused and inconsistent, and that's why they think that. Not because they looked at the same facts and came to an honest disagreement or an honestly different opinion. They must just be confused all the time. And maybe it's a mixture of this for like those radio hosts. Maybe these radio hosts are just people who thought like that and then became radio hosts. And maybe not everything they say is just supposed to be propping up an ideology. Maybe they're not just ideologues. Maybe there's like some cognitive dissonance. Right? Maybe it's a mixture of the two of those things. Maybe they're not just being grifters. Because I talked earlier about accusing people of being grifters who are not grifters. Or maybe they're partially a grifter. You see what I mean about the complicated nature of things? You see what I mean? You see that? Yeah. These are things that you can't put on a picket fence. Excuse me, a picket sign. Thank you very much for that confusion, Squidward Tentacles. These are things you can't just put on a picket sign. These are things you can't put on a shirt. Or maybe even a sandwich board. These are things that take a while to discuss. And, that's what I do here on Pac-Man Thoughts. That's why my videos are so long. Because sometimes I'd go out to make a video like, this is the dumbest thing in the world. Like today my video was honestly going to be more about how I think the right wing is less likely to see things as nuanced. But then I was starting to think like, okay, there's channels like TYT. And they almost always start with the conclusion and work their way backwards. The right wing lacks empathy. The right wing is just insane. And this story we're going to tell you is going to prove that. And no matter what the video is about, we're going to end up at that conclusion. Now, I think I've seen that a lot more on the right than on the left. But, I mean, does it really matter at the end of the day who does it more often? It doesn't matter more that it's just being done? And shouldn't we just try to combat that? And also, this is the reason why I am so much in favor of not censoring things, even at the corporate private level. Because I know that, like, this goes back to, like, the green eggs and ham thing. If a company decides, hey, you know what, we don't want this to be what represents our company, that's not a First Amendment violation. It is also not a First Amendment violation for a private company to realize that you are a bigot and to fire you. That's not a First Amendment violation, because that's not any kind of violation, because political ideology is not a protected class. Religion is, which is weird, because if you have a religious belief, it's given protection, but if you have a sincerely held philosophical belief, it's not given protection. Which I don't know what the solution is to that. I don't know if we should have either both of those or neither of those or whatever. But I understand that a private company is not beholden to the First Amendment, but I believe that the First Amendment, the spirit of the First Amendment, should apply as well when making decisions about what private companies do on the part of boards and stuff, because I think it's so important to be able to hear opposing viewpoints, or even if someone's saying something crazy, even if someone's just saying something absolutely crazy and you're never going to agree with it. I think it's so important for you to be able to hear what that person is saying and know how to respond to it. You need to get good at that. Because a lot of this stuff we're doing now with censoring any and all hate speech, and of course I do think there should be some caveats for, like, if someone's, if someone is a victim of something and they don't want that video up there, I think that's a different thing. If someone is, like, harassing you at work and you don't want that video to become public because they were saying very horrible things about you, I think that should be, I think that's a different scenario. But in general, like, if something happened in a public place and, like, it's a thing that's already public, and, these social media sites and these networks and these news organizations trying to censor what was even said, where you can't even see it for the sake of, like, reference, I think that's bad. I think you need to hear the hateful things that people are saying and know how to counter them. I think we need to put in the spotlight the hateful things that people are saying, and not, like, give the stuff that much power where it's like we're afraid of it. That's really what I think. So even for that reason, I think we should be more in favor of free speech. I think this is also the deal with college classes. Now, I don't think that this means that universities should just prop up, like, extremely bigoted professors. Like, professors are saying, like, racist or transphobic or homophobic things. And it's like, well, you should hire all types. And it's like, no, I think universities have the right to not hire people who are saying hateful things. But, in the classroom, for example, not being able to have certain opinions in the classroom, not being able to have certain speakers who are invited by students even speak at the university. Because the university decides, this, granted that like, as long as you're not having, like, an insightful hate group there or something. Like, yeah, I don't think a university should be blamed for, like, not letting the Klan speak or something if they're afraid it's gonna, like, drive up some kind of riot or something. But like, if it's a person who is like, has a different political belief, like far right, even, like, far right, what you consider, like, bigoted political beliefs, and I realize, like, the irony of, like, me introducing my own standards here. I'm like, well, as long as it's not this, and it's like, well, who draws the line? I don't know. I think there is a line. I think it'd be stupid to say there's no line. But it is a matter of opinion that we would have to agree to as a society. But I think in most cases, most of the people who would speak there, just having different political beliefs, I don't think there's anything that a university should be saying, like, okay, this person can't speak there. I was giving a presentation in one of my college classes about the Westboro Baptist Church and some of the crazy things they said. And one of the guys from the Westboro, I was showing a video, and one of the guys from the Westboro Baptist Church had a very hateful shirt, had a very offensive shirt. And the teacher told me that I could not show that video in class because the guy in the video who I was saying was hateful had a hateful shirt. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That's not a First Amendment issue. Well, okay, it's if it's a public college, maybe it is a First Amendment issue. Okay, assume that I went to a private college, even though I didn't, just for the sake of this argument. Like, even that, I think should be, be more advocating of free speech in that scenario. But it's like I said, everything's complicated because even the free speech thing gets a little in the weeds, because I hear people all the time, like, claiming that a company violated their free speech. When I think the company came to a completely reasonable decision about not allowing, like, an employee to just, like, spew hatred at like, their customers or something like that. Yeah, to me that's different. I think in a directly harmful situation like that, where it's something with the company, you're trying to maintain good customer service or something, yeah, I understand that. But maybe even that is a little bit hypocritical of me, because here I am saying that, like, when it comes to YouTube, they should leave these things up and they shouldn't be censoring things. I made a whole other video about that on this channel. But it's like, you could say YouTube is trying to make themselves look good for their customers. So I don't know. Maybe there's some inconsistency there I need to explore. I'm not sure. I think maybe with YouTube it's the fact that it's a more varied company, It's like it's supposed to be just a platform that represents a plethora of different types of people. Versus like, I don't know. I'm thinking like Phil Robertson and Duck Dynasty, for example. Yeah, I think a platform allowing a diverse platform allowing a certain amount of, or a certain like amount of far rightness on their platform. I think that's one thing, and like, but allowing like Phil Robertson to represent their company by, you know, producing one of their shows and also having him say very homophobic things. To me, that seems like a different thing, and I don't think it's a scenario where I'm like, I'm disagreeing with one thing and not the other, because of ideology, because both of these things that I'm talking about would be right-wing speech, you know. For example, I think Phil Robertson, if he, you know, those homophobic things he said, if he wanted to go on YouTube and say those things and make his own private video, be like, hey, here's why I don't like this. That's one thing, but like that'd be like basically YouTube, like sponsoring a YouTube original series with Phil Robertson. I wouldn't expect them to do that, because then it's like they're like a partner with the company. Which, I mean, yes, I realize that YouTube also, like, if you have ads, you're a partner. But I mean, it's closer to a public service than a private company at that point, because there's so many different types of people. Anyway, this is just me working out my own nuances of things. Don't you love to hear me do that in real time? Yeah. But I think I've said pretty much everything I want to say on this. But just I don't like this whole ideologue culture, and I wish that it was easier to just have discussions. And by the way, having discussions does not mean that you sit back and you always are kumbaya about things. Me having a discussion with someone means that, like, if I'm talking to them and I think that something they said is batshit crazy, I'm going to tell them I think it's batshit crazy. I might not say batshit crazy, because then I might shut the conversation down. But I'm going to say, no, I don't agree with that at all. Right? But I'm not going to say, you know what? I know what people on your side are like. And I know you, and you know, you're confused about everything, and you're wrong about everything, and you're right about nothing. I don't think that's not really my style. I'm willing to talk to almost anybody. Even this includes, you know, people who are very religious, who are trying to convert me a lot of the time. I admit that I do get very annoyed sometimes when I'm talking to people about something not religious, and they keep bringing religion up, particularly if they're bringing religion up in a way where they think that I've never heard what they're saying before. So, like, you know, if I'm, like, at work and someone wants to hand me, like, a tract and have a whole discussion with me there about nothing that I'm selling, you know, my claim of I will listen to almost anyone about anything, I don't really extend that to that, because in that scenario, it's like, there's no reason for us to be having that discussion. But if I'm wanting to know about something, or if I'm wanting to bounce something around people, I will talk to almost anybody, which is why I will, you know, frequently I'll check back with Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro or, you know, Jordan Peterson, or whoever is. I mean, I guess maybe I'm a little lazy because those are really the only ones I know. But I mean, I just found this guy, Matt Walsh, today. His name sounds very familiar. I think he's one of those people that has a lot of people who hate him. I don't have a solid understanding of what he does, I guess. And then there was also, who's that guy who ran for office in the UK? He kept getting milkshakes thrown at him. You know what I'm talking about. He's one of the, he's a very right-wing politician. And then there's, like, people like Thunderfoot as well, who tend to agree with about scientific things, but, like, just completely ignorant about a lot of things when it comes to, like, representation and, well, specifically, like African-American civil rights, that kind of thing. I've heard him talk about things like that, and I thought he was just incorrect about that. I don't want to sit here and say that Thunderfoot is like, bigoted about that. You should probably just look up his videos. But he had a take about university students and racism, like racism protests, and I didn't I don't remember like not agreeing with him on that at all. But I don't want to sit here and like say, well, he said this. Like, you should just look up his video, because if I say something, I'm going to get it wrong, and I don't want to misrepresent someone. But yeah, I also kind of have this problem with Steven Crowder sometimes when it comes to what I was talking about earlier with knowing someone's intent. Because when I listen to Steven Crowder sometimes, and like I hear him just make very obvious fallacies in his arguments, I think the most common ones I hear him make are like the false dichotomy with gender issues, the straw manning with a lot of people on the left, and just appeals to tradition, which is kind of a thing on the right in general. That's pretty common. But, he is one of those guys that he seems to go out, and they do this on Fox News, he seems to go out and only find people to debate who don't know what they're talking about. And I'm not going to sit here and say, well, if I talk to him, the conversation would be over. I'm not going to say that, but it's like, I'm no longer a college student. I've looked up a lot of these things. A lot of things he talks about I haven't looked up, and I don't have any kind of extensive knowledge on. But the few things that he's talked about that I do have extensive knowledge on, I'm like, okay, no one that he talked to said this very obvious thing that no one is saying, which makes me think that he cut out those people who did say that in that Ray Comfort way. So in that scenario, I'm like, do I believe what this guy's saying? Is he going out and cherry-picking the people who are least apt to offer a very well thought out and sound critique of what he's saying? Is he weeding those people out? Because that kind of falls into that category of, well, this is just disingenuous. I don't know. Anyway, political ideologies. Very ambiguous note I'm leaving on here. What do you think? Pac-Man Thoughts. Episode 957 billion. Anyway, I will see you guys next time. Thanks for listening to my rant. You're so sweet. Bye-bye.